Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. The following account may sound like a fantastic story, but I promise you that it was something that I really did experience. I was born in Mississippi in the early 1970s. When I was a young child, I was adopted by a couple who seemed nice at first but who later turned out to be abusive. At night, I would cry and implore God to take me away. I knew that I wasn't really wanted by my adoptive parents, nor was I wanted by my natural parents, who gave me up for adoption in the first place. My adoptive father continued to beat me into my first year of high school, and when I finally decided to defend myself, I beat my adoptive father so badly that the police were called. The police didn't want to hear that I was acting in self-defense, however, and I was charged with assault and later sentenced by the court to spend 6 months in juvenile detention. After my time in juvenile detention, I was picked up by a social worker and placed back in a foster home, since my adoptive parents decided that they didn't want me anymore. In those days, I would ask God about my purpose on earth and what it was about me that seemed to attract the scorn and enmity of others. On my 18th birthday, I was told to leave the foster home, and I had nowhere else to go but to live on the street. In those days, I was full of anger towards the system that never seemed to represent, defend, or care about my welfare, and it was owing to that indignation and apathy that I decided to drop out of high school. I was living on the street and turned to petty theft to be able to afford food, and at night I would lie on the hard ground and cover myself with a newspaper to try and stay warm. Living on the street, people would spit on me, call me a lazy bum, and make similar criticisms. There were times when I would go hungry for a couple of days at a time, and I would use alcohol or drugs to try and make myself feel better, even if feeling better was only for the most fleeting of moments. I didn't care so much about my health, and I reasoned that if God himself didn't care about me, why should I take care of myself? It wasn't long before I became addicted to those drugs, and my newly formed habit very soon became expensive. And it was because of my need to satisfy the drug cravings more frequently, or with larger doses, that I began to steal more valuable things or to steal more frequently. On that fateful day of my poisoning, soon after dosing myself, I began to spasm and vomit. It's finally over, I thought, as my body began to shut down. I told myself that I was finally going to a place of peace, not heaven or hell, for that matter, since I stopped believing that either place existed, but rather to a place of darkness and of nothingness. I remember that my body stopped spasming, and I remember the outpouring of peace that washed over me and filled me. Then suddenly, I found myself traveling 1,000,000 miles a second through a dark tunnel, and then that journey through the tunnel ended abruptly in the blackness of the void. In that void, I felt so free to explore, and I felt free of the pain I carried in my heart. In the void, I didn't experience joy, but neither did I experience sadness. The void was, for me, an extremely peaceful place, even though from time to time I did feel as if someone was watching me. I don't know how long I had been in the void when I began to talk to God again. Why did my family reject me, even though I was a good child? Why weren't you there for me? I asked. I wanted to make peace with God, and I wanted to know that, in spite of the suffering that I endured, all I bore was for my highest good. I wanted to know that God loved me. While I asked God for answers, I could feel all the while that something was watching me. Why do I even bother? I asked rhetorically, reverting to embittered sentiments when the answers to my questions weren't forthcoming. In bitter resignation, I gave up asking questions, and it was at that very moment that I began to hear the faintest voice. "Open to me and let me in," the voice repeated. "I can't stop you, so you may as well come in," I replied. Then I watched as a pinpoint of light approached at incredible speed, and that source of light became visibly larger as it neared. As it neared, the light illuminated the void with the brightest light, transforming it into a place of light. I found the light to be so bright that I had to squint my eyes, yet I wasn't averse to being in its presence because the light was accompanied by a majestic, enormous, and intense love, a love that I had never before nor since experienced. The love was so intense that it felt as if it was stripping away the darkness that enveloped me and had become like a protective shell. The power of that love was so overpowering and overwhelming that all I could do was embrace the transformation that it had set in motion. As my eyes slowly acclimated to the light, I saw the silhouettes of 2 very tall beings, and as those beings approached, I could see that they were dressed in robes tied with a sash. The being to my left appeared as Jesus in those photos that adorned the walls of the chapel that I would visit. The being to my right, however, was beautiful in a way that far exceeded my ability to express just how beautiful that being was. "Who are you? And where am I?" I asked nervously. "Be not afraid, child. You know both of us by many names." That beautiful being to my right answered. "Really? I know you both. I don't think so, I replied sheepishly. Samael, Satan, and Lucifer are but a few of the names humans know me by, the being on the right stated conceitedly. My child, you also call me many names. Yeshua, Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the being to my left stated. If you both are who you say you are, how can you stand to be in each other's presence? I asked. My child, though the ordinances as decreed by the Father are very different, my brother and I both serve the will of our Father, Jesus said. Your brother? The Father? What the hell is going on here? How is it that you would call Satan your brother? I asked. What he means is that our Father created all of us. You, me, and him, Satan advised with audible disdain. My Father created us first, and we were his beloved creations, and then he created humans. He gave humans gifts that he did not give his first creations. Not only did he give humans free will, but he also gave them a short lifespan. He made humans his priority. I was jealous of your gifts, so I have since declared my sovereignty and my resolve to sever the bond between humans and our Father, Satan hissed. But if we were all God's creation, wouldn't that make all of us brothers? I asked. Jesus remained silent while Satan rambled. That is enough, Samael, he said finally. To answer your question, my child, yes, we are all my Father's creation, so the answer to your question is yes, Jesus confirmed. As I considered what I wanted to ask next, I glanced at Satan, only to notice his menacing countenance. His unnerving expression reminded me so much of how my adoptive family used to regard me. Why am I here? Shouldn't I be in hell? I asked. Just as quickly as I asked that question, Jesus began to laugh, the most joyous laugh that I have ever heard. Jason, you have been in hell for the past 70,000 years. I'm here to deliver you, he said. How can that be when I only just arrived? I asked, expressing my incredulity. My words made Jesus laugh heartily. In this place, time doesn't pass in the same way that it passes on earth, he replied. I thought that hell was a place of fire and brimstone, a place where souls are tortured for all eternity in the lake of fire, I said as I tried to comprehend the incredible things I was being told. You are right, however, that part of hell is reserved for the worst of your species, Satan smirked, and I cringed and cowered as I heard the delight in his boastful eloquence. Brother, that's enough now. He has served his time, and he has turned to our Father. You cannot detain him any longer, Jesus reproved. Very well, then. Jason, until that day when we meet again, farewell. He's all yours, brother, Satan said before suddenly disappearing. I was alone with Jesus and my thoughts when Jesus said, "It is okay, my child, you may ask me the questions of your heart." I thought carefully about what I wanted to ask him before I finally asked, why did my natural parents and my adoptive parents abandon me? Why did God allow those things to happen to me? Jesus looked deeply into my eyes before he replied, your parents loved you as my Father has loved you, although you won't be able to remember your time with them because you were so young. Your mother and father parted ways with the world when they were suddenly killed in a car accident. They implored my Father to allow them to return to earth, but the condition of their bodies precluded such an option. My Father has been known to heal bodies, but on that occasion, he decided not to intervene. I could feel tears start to well up when I asked Jesus, why did God leave me to be cared for by those people who didn't love me or care about me? Your adoptive parents were upstanding members of the community, but they too were corrupted by Samael, Jesus explained. Why did God allow me to be beaten by my adoptive father? I asked. Because you provided an outlet for them. If you hadn't taken on that role, your adoptive father would have ended up killing your foster sister in a fit of rage. Because of your sacrifice, your sister will never have to experience such violence, Jesus explained. Why didn't God make his presence known to me or explain such things when I begged him? The answers come when one is really ready to listen. From the point of view of the child in the throes of experiencing such heartbreak, they are never in an emotional or mental space where reasons would prevent them from experiencing heartbreak because their heart is so open. Nor do most children necessarily possess the cunning or maturity to understand. There are other reasons not to give explanations that have to do with keeping the heart and mind pure, he explained. I could understand what he was saying, but I still felt the weight of my pain and heartbreak because, deep down, I was still that hurt child. Jesus listened patiently as I aired my frustrations, and when I had finished venting, Jesus moved forward and hugged me. If anyone knew what heartbreak and betrayal were like, it was him, I reasoned. After a while, Jesus released me from his embrace and declared, Jason, it is time to return to your earthly life. You've punished yourself enough. Why do I have to go back to earth? There is nothing for me to look forward to except possibly more jail time, I said. Come walk with me, he said, and it was then that we began to walk. That place illuminated by light suddenly turned into a landscape of beautiful and luxurious gardens of various colors, and it was as if a curtain had been hiding it the whole time. Why do I have to return? I asked. Because you still have much to do in your life on earth. Things will get better, you will see, he replied. Jesus gave me a view into my future, and I was able to see what I could expect if I were to return. In spite of my reluctance, I agreed to return, and as soon as I did, I awoke in my body, in the back of an ambulance. The paramedic who sat beside my body in the back of the ambulance screamed at her partner that I was alive, and her partner, who was driving, then proceeded to drive me to the nearest hospital. Stay with us, kid, we're nearly there, the driver reassured. Did I die? I asked the paramedic. Yes, you overdosed and died, she replied. The doctors tested me to find out how I could have come back to life after being dead for nearly an hour, and they couldn't understand how I was able to return with normally functioning cognition. When I was discharged from the hospital, I was charged with theft, but because the judge was sympathetic, I didn't have to spend time in prison. Nevertheless, I had nowhere to stay, but it was a kind lady who I had known since childhood who decided to take me in. She was the first person to whom I told of my NDE, and it was when I explained to her what Jesus had explained to me about what happened to my natural parents that made her realize that I might not be crazy after all. She was the first person to truly love me, and she helped me graduate and apply for grants to be able to attend college. She was there when I obtained my bachelor degree, later when I got married, and when my wife and I became parents. She was the woman I called Mum and the angel in my life. It took me a while to understand why I had to go through everything that I did. The adoptive parents I once had went to prison for child abuse, and I like to think that I protected those children by being the scapegoat for their abuse when I was living with them. I want to finish by saying that no matter how cleverly Satan conspires against us, he cannot stop us from calling out to God in the time of our greatest need.